Why does the Christian God never heal amputees? Why have we never seen arms or legs grow back in the televised programs shown by the evangelical churches where the pastors claim to have miraculous powers and supposedly heal people in the name of Jesus? Now, this is a difficult question to answer for those Christians who believe in miracles and frequent these kind of places. Most pastors, as we know, will claim to have cured people of diseases or cancer or other ailments, but these are difficult to prove one way or the other. You'll never see Benny Hinn or David Oyedepo or any other preacher approaching a person with an amputated arm or leg and healing the person and magically growing back the appendage live on TV. In fact, they'll probably tell their staff to ensure this kind of person is kept as far away from the stage as possible. But even going back into early Christian history, right up to the time of Jesus and Jesus himself, there is no example of him or any Christian saint magically growing back the arms or legs of anyone. Now, these kind of questions regarding miracles that would definitively and without any doubt prove that the Christian preachers had great powers and that Christianity was the true faith have always been around since Christian history is full of accounts of miracles and the supernatural. And one of the earliest versions of this challenge we have records for was put forward by the Emperor Julian, or Julian the Apostate as Christians labelled him, because of his rejection of Christianity. And this was in exchange with a Christian cleric. And that was a chap called Maris, the blind bishop of Chalcedon, the suburb of Constantinople on the Asian side of the Bosphorus. In a nutshell, Julian challenged this notion of miracles and asked the blind bishop why Jesus had failed to give the bishop his vision back. Only the bishop who had served the church for so long, even after he had gone blind, deserved a little help from the Christian God, and a miracle would have been appropriate. The story is recorded by Sozomen, a 5th century historian of the Christian church. Sozomen recorded the exchange in his work Ecclesiastical History. And we also have another source in Socrates Scholasticus, the 4th and early 5th century church historian, who narrates it in his work, which coincidentally has the same name. The Bishop Maris was well known for his views, being an Arian Christian rather than a Catholic. He had been present at the famous Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, where he represented the Arian point of view along with Arius himself and a number of other bishops. Maris had gone blind despite being a devout believer, and Socrates Scholasticus records that he had developed cataracts which had destroyed his eyesight, and so he always walked around holding the hand of an assistant. Julian, it is recorded, was visiting the Temple of Fortuna in Constantinople one day. During these early years of the city being the second capital of the empire, there were 4 pagan temples still remaining in the city, we're told, a legacy of the times before Constantine when the city was pagan Byzantium. But the city had been specifically turned into a new Christian capital by Constantine, and so what condition these temples were in by the time of Julian is difficult to say. But while he was at the temple, the blind bishop happened to be passing, and the stories tell us Julian wished to see him, and the bishop was led into the presence of the emperor. A 17th century Renaissance book also records the exchange between the two in a succinct fashion. Since the Christians believed so heavily in miracles at Christian holy sites, with people being miraculously healed, perhaps the bishop should himself trek to the Holy Land for some divine help, Julian is said to have suggested. Perhaps he would come back with his eyesight fully restored. Quote, when Julian the Apostate in a mock demanded of blind Maris why he went not to Galilee to recover his eyesight, he made him this answer, "No, I am contented with my blindness, because I may not see such a tyrant as thou art," unquote. So the bishop, presumably angered by the gentle mocking, refused to face the actual issue of the epidemic of miracles in Christian Gospels and other narratives, but which failed to appear in real life. No miracle was ever shown to Emperor Julian by any Christian preacher or saint or church father. Instead, Maris condemned the emperor, who was by now openly pagan. But going back to much earlier sources, Socrates writes that the bishop showed no respect and immediately attacked the emperor for having rejected Christianity and criticized him for his impiety and apostasy and for turning to atheism, referring to his pagan beliefs. Sozomen also records a similar story in that the bishop criticized Julian for being irreligious, i.e. for not being a Christian, and also called him an atheist and attacked him for being an apostate. Now, Julian was not the type to punish people for insolence and even for open disrespect to his face, but he did adopt an equally rude attitude towards the bishop, we're told. Quote, "You blind old fool, this Galilean God of yours will never cure you," he is reported to have said. So, back to the underlying issue, why did the Christians go around hailing numerous supposed miracles when the bishop, who deserved pity from the Christian God, especially after having served him for so long, seemed not to be a beneficiary for his mercy? Maris dodged the issue and would continue his reply in the same insulting fashion, going as far as to suggest his sight was taken away to prevent him seeing an atheist emperor. Quote, "I thank God for bereaving me of my sight, that I might not behold the face of one who has fallen into such awful impiety," Socrates records him saying. And Solomon records that Maris thanked God that his blindness prevented him from seeing someone, quote, "one who has fallen away from our religion," unquote, meaning Christianity. And that was the end of the short and sharp exchange between the two. But who knows, perhaps Maris may have had thoughts afterwards on the issue of spurious miracles that plagued the Christianity of those times. Anyway, the bishop was led away, and Solomon remarks on Julian's policy of toleration, and we know he passed no laws that forbade Christian worship or made life difficult for Christians. Socrates writes that this toleration was only because Julian knew persecution would only generate martyrs, and which would only aid the cause of the Christians. So, a very quick video on the interesting meeting between a committed pagan emperor and a committed Christian. A valid point made by Julian is that Christian miracles in his time, and especially in his presence, seemed to be in short supply. Why had the number of Christian miracles dwindled into nothing by his time? Surely this was the right time for Jesus, if he was watching from above in the Christian heaven, to manufacture a miracle by healing the bishop right in front of Julian, a skeptic who had apostatized. And Julian would surely have converted back to Christianity instantly. And of course, the instant healing of a blind person's sight falls in the same category as why amputees never seem to get healed in front of skeptics today. There are numerous Christian pilgrimage sites all around Israel and Europe and wider afield, to which Christian pilgrims flock in their millions every year, and plenty of miracles of a very dubious nature are claimed. Devotees claim their ailments have gone away, or someone who was disabled managed to walk again, etc. But even with phones in everyone's pockets and the ability to take pictures and make videos of the extraordinary, nobody has ever captured incontrovertible evidence of Christian miracles. And that would be amputees whose legs or arms have grown back, and of course, utilizing the Emperor Julian's example with Maris, lots of blind people suddenly gaining the power of sight as they pray at these places and going home with full 20/20 vision. And that's it for this one. Last but not least, a quick shout out to my Patreons and a big thanks to you for watching. See you on the next one.